So what you're looking at here is, and this is sort of one of those things where I wish I had Navid here, but the clutter that we have in quirks, and then on top of balance stuff, every single mech you're looking at right now has a cooldown quirk. Okay, so which means, like, multiples of these chassis variants have cooldowns here. But what this means is at least has one, if not two, sometimes three mechs here. And this is only inner sphere, by the way. And if you notice here, this is almost every single one. And this has been one of those things where I've always talked about, whereas the reduction of quirks could have happened dramatically. Because if you're having to give a Commando 3A 15% cooldown, a Flea 19, 20%, what I would look at here is across the board, increasing cooldown of inner sphere weapons by, let's just say 10%. And then what that would allow you to do is dramatically reduce the amount of quirks that you have on the table. And this is just cooldown, by the way. So for all that excess, inputs, and this has sort of been one of my critiques of the Cauldron, which is back when I did quirks and I started quirks, I realized at the end there that I wanted to de-emphasize that and go to base stats. And this is one of those things where, like, I feel like it just makes perfect sense, right? Like, if across the board on inner sphere mechs, you have a large majority to make them capable, have a 10% cooldown. I would have to see the numbers. You'd have to like actually do the analytics. But like, if a large majority of them require a cooldown quirk, then what you do is across the board on inner sphere side, you buff them. And then on the, and then you don't have literally hundreds of inputs and then thousands of inputs. And this is sort of what I was talking about, which is armor and heat and stuff. If you're, let's put it this way. From a heat standpoint, just heat quirk. How many of them, these mechs get heat or heat dissipation? Let's put both of these here. Look at how many inner sphere mechs have heat or heat dissipation. Almost all, like, this is almost all variants across the board. So they're no longer a quirk. To me, how I look at this is an IS versus clan balance. What we're basically saying is when a mech has a cooldown or heat dissipation quirk, is that there's an imbalance. Okay, let's go to the Urbies here. Why does a K9, like, again, one of the best 30 tonners, it gets a 5%. So even one of the best 30 tonners out there gets a 5% heat dissipation. Okay, and it gets a ballistic cooldown, right? One of the best 30 tonners there is. It's tiny, it tanks like a beast. The Urbie has that. And so that's where I wanted the Cauldron and PGI to, and again, I fully take responsibility. Back when I did the quirks, I didn't recognize this. Also, too, is at the end, I wasn't allowed to fix it and say, hey, I think we need to go to baseline stats and so forth. So here's a chance to where, and this is where they're working within their means. They can only do so much. They can't, and they've done a really good job. But like, this is where IS versus clan could be fixed. Like, instead of having thousands of quirks, you would still basically get this. If majority of IS mechs need some type of heat dissipation, then just fix it on the heatsink side of things, and then you don't have to worry about giving thousands of quirks out there. So you wouldn't nerf. It's not like I'm asking you to nerf all the IS mechs. What I'm saying is roll that into just the base stats. If you're having to give ammo quirks and stuff, maybe, or jam chance, like, maybe it's just one of those things where, like, and again, I know there's edge cases where you don't want some mechs because of boating capabilities, right? Like, it's scary if the Annie or whatever. Well, then what you do, and again, I've talked about this in like, let's talk about another, thing here when it comes to, like, what about armor quirks, or structure? Okay, so I'm gonna go through the armor. If they have one mech has these, and this is just armor. So this is just armor on the IS side. Look how many variants have armor and structure. Okay. So in my opinion, what this results in is in game, you have, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because quirks are always a big thing, right? We have this huge list of stuff. To me, there's nothing special about this quirk list here. The only thing that's special is maybe pulse laser cooldown, pulse laser range, and pulse laser heat gen, right? Because this mech is particular. It needs something on the arm to do better at, right? But all the other stuff here, all the other, you know, non-skill tree related stuff, right? Why don't you just roll it right into base? And then you don't have to worry about this. And if you have outliers that still need a little bit more, then that's where quirks come in. So I've just felt like quirks, what they've done is they're there to fix imbalances between IS and clan instead of just fixing the imbalances and then giving uniqueness, you know. And I'm going to do the same thing here for structure. You know, is there any, you know, let's get rid of armor here. Just 1 second. So here's another list. This is all structure. Again, you're going to see the similar things. And we're always talking about like IS clan balance or like match balance and how much damage or DPS out there or how much, whatever it is. Well, you know, I've ranted so much about this, but there's power creep in MWO that's been happening, you know, since the clans. And the quirks just compound on some of that instead of looking at just IS. So I've just looked at structure and armor, and almost every single chassis in this game has structure and armor on IS side, right? Some less so than others. So you have a grasshopper that has structure, right? And again, there, you know, it's like, okay. But that's my point, is like, why not just roll this into the base stats? And then that way you don't have to have thousands of inputs. But also the over complicated UI part of having to then display it in game, right? And that addresses so much. And that's what I've hoped that they could do, is like if you're needing laser duration and cooldown on the IS side of X level, then roll those stats into the baseline, get rid of all this extra fluff, and then that way we don't have to worry about it. The mech would just have extra structure or extra armor. Now, I know that there's some complications when it comes to some of this, because of like, if you give extra armor, then they can reduce that armor and they get free tonnage. Roger that. Then give it into structure. But it's just one of those things where the clutter, I felt like, and maybe that's something that they can do on the secondary side of things. Like now that they're ramping down, basically they're at the end of quirk adjustments, right? Pass, they may do a few more, but in general, they could go back and really clean up a lot of this stuff to where like, hey, yeah, riddle me this, you know, how is clan and IS balance? I've said this for years now. I don't think anybody actually knows because of how much just quirks there are. Not saying that quirks don't have their place. They obviously do. But if what's the main difference between IS and clan as far as balance wise? And I don't think we've ever, I mean, we used to hear it from PGI directly, like, oh, one's, you know, clans are more deadly and they have more range and firepower, but they're squishier. You know, is IS more tanky? Well, then, you know, why not really hone in on that sort of aspect between, and then you could have subclasses and so forth and so on. But I just feel like it gets overly confusing when it comes to quirks, and that instead of it being easier to understand, it's just become more complicated. And then you throw in the fact of, you know, you look at any of these, and some of these, again, when I click on cooldown or structure or armor, and every single inner sphere mech has them, I no longer think it's it's not a quirk issue. It's a balance issue. Fix that balance at the bottom. You know, that to me, that makes sense. You know, it just makes sense. Energy heat here, right? If every mech on here needs energy heat to be competitive, the Wolfhound here needs energy heat, then like just baseline stats change the energy heat, and then that way you don't have to have hundreds of inputs. Anyways, rant over, but I did feel like this was something important to cover, so there's that.